What kind of snake is this little one?
So this is it's an Antaresia. The genus is Antaresia. She's a marbled children's python.
Oh,
So
lovely.
she's one of my daughter's pets, and she's very good actually because sometimes you never know what you're going to get when you get a pet snake. Sometimes you can get a little rascal. She's an angel, an absolute angel. Uh, she eats whatever she's given. She loves to come out for cuddles, so she's the perfect first timer snake if you're a first timer owner, sort of thing. But obviously, we've got multiple pet snakes. She's the smallest of the ones we've got. We've got big, gigantic 5 kilo diamond python.
Mm.
We've got coastals. We've got mixtures, like sort of like a integrades. So whatever people don't want, we end up adopting. So
Mm. They do
usually
make
the
very, very
coastal,
sweet pets.
yeah, they really do, honestly, and they're such low maintenance
Mm.
because they pretty much only need to be fed like once a week in summer, and then in winter you just don't have to feed them at all because they lower their metabolic processes so that they don't require food.
Mm.
So it's really good actually. They don't bark and they don't need to be taken for a walk, which is great.
Yeah,
So
nice and easy.
she's very nice and easy. And you can go away on holiday and just have someone pop in and check on their water, and it's all good. Yeah.
Mm.
Have you got pets, Zoe?
Not at the moment. I'm in a rental, so no pets for me currently, but I would love to eventually get a blue tongue lizard. I just think they're so beautiful, they're so gorgeous,
Mm,
they're so special. So that's
yeah.
hopefully going to be my next pet. Mm.
We also have a pet blue tongue lizard, and
Oh, lovely.
honestly, they're a little bit like a pet dog. Honestly, they're so sweet.
Mm.
And we've got a turtle. The turtle's name is Trevor, and Trevor's also very much like a dog. He just follows you around the house, and reptiles are the best.
They really are, aren't they? They're so beautiful. Very,
They're
very
so
special
cute.
pets. Mm.
Have you had a reptile pet before?
I haven't, no. No, I haven't, not yet.
Mm.
My mum is a little scared of reptiles, so didn't have any growing up. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
but
Oh,
that's
that's a
okay.
pity. A blue tongue lizard is a good way to start, actually,
Mm.
because
Yeah.
they're pretty easy as well. Not bitey, and they're if you get them from little, it's actually you can basically adopt one from national parks, ones that are uh, people have given them up as their pets, and so you can adopt ones that no longer are wanted by their owners. So
Mm.
it's actually quite a good way to start.
Yeah. Oh, we already have some questions rolling and everyone's very, very keen. We've got some question time at the end of the talk, so I will come back and I'll make sure that I read out your questions and we'll have a chat about them at the end. But thank you so much for putting them in the chat. I'll, yeah, if everyone else could continue to put their questions in the chat, I'll make sure that I read all of them out at the end. Mm.
Make sure they're easy for me to answer. No curveballs, hey. Sometimes people love to test you and they'll send you a photograph of like an exotic snake, or a rubber snake from a toy shop, like blurry photo of a rubber snake from a toy shop. And they'll be like, what's this that I found in my backyard? And I'm like, I can see that's a toy snake.
Just to try and trick you, just to try and get you.
Trying to trick me. Funnily enough, we do get called fairly regularly to rubber snakes that obviously neighbors have planted on their neighbors' driveways, or kids that have just put them out for a bit of a laugh. So we have been called out to quite a few of those, to the massive embarrassment of the homeowners. They're like, "Oh my God, I'm sorry we called you out for a rubber snake."
I appreciate that they were being very cautious. I
Yeah,
appreciate
we'd
that.
rather, because their main concern is usually, I've got a snake on my driveway. It hasn't moved for like hours. There must be something wrong with it. So of course we rush out there because we go, oh no, the poor thing is sick or injured.
Yeah.
And we get there and we're like, well, probably not going to move ever
Mm.
again.
Because it was never moving at all.
It's never
Mhm.
moving at all. Yeah, it's good to keep us on our toes, though.
Yeah, absolutely. I reckon I will give it 1 or 2 more minutes and then we will get started. But we've already got some really great questions in the chat. I'm hoping we'll cover a lot of these questions in the talk, but I will make sure that I read back through them at the end of the talk.
All righty,
Mm.
no worries. I will. I will. What number of questions are you expecting?
Oh, we've got a lot coming in already. Yeah, people are really interested, which is wonderful. Hopefully we'll have a good 15 minutes or so at the end for question time.
Okay,
Yeah,
sounds excellent. It's good that people are interested enough in our little snaky critters to ask
absolutely.
questions. Well,
Absolutely.
they can be quite polarizing. You
Mm,
know, sometimes people just absolutely love them, um, and other people are just ugh, don't like the look of them, don't like the
yeah.
feel of them, and that's fair.
Mm.
You don't have to love them. They're not quintessentially cute, but I think they're adorable.
Yeah, I think so too.
I always wondered what it would be like if you put fur on a snake, and because people will like cute and furry things, and I wonder if you
Mm.
put fur on them if they'd be cuter.
Yeah.
It looked like a tail slithering around.
Yeah, it would. Well, I will address this one question before we get started. I've had a question about if the recording can be shared. Yes, the recording can absolutely be shared. If you contact, if you go through Humanitics and contact me afterwards specifically, I can share the recording with you so that you're able to share it with your family and anyone who couldn't make it tonight. And on that note, I think we should get started. Waited a little while.
Sounds
We've got a bunch of people here, which is so fantastic. I'm so excited to see so many people wanting to come to the talk with us.
excellent. Good to see everyone. I wonder if I even know some of you.
Okie dokie. So, hi everyone. Welcome to our first webinar of the 2026 Biodiversity Webinar Series, which is a series where I'll be hosting a series of webinars with different animal experts over the course of the year. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. And I'm just going to do our welcome to country and then we'll get started. We acknowledge the traditional custodians and their country. By these words, we show our respect to all Aboriginal people. We acknowledge elders past and present and the spirits and ancestors of the clans that lived in this area. Okay, so I'm Zoe and I'm one of the biodiversity officers here at Northern Beaches Council, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to today's session where we are going to learn from one of our local snake experts about the common species on the Northern Beaches and what we can do to coexist with them safely. So we have Lynn Lee here with us. She is one of our local snake catchers and an incredible wildlife rescuer who has been working on the Northern Beaches for many years, helping to relocate and protect our local snakes. She's helped care for and rehabilitate a huge range of species on the Northern Beaches, not just our wonderful snakes, but she's a very hardworking volunteer with Sydney Wildlife Rescue. And she was the founder and driving force behind the Sydney Wildlife Mobile Care Unit, which, as you can see here in this picture, is a reconfigured motorhome transformed into a fully functional mobile wildlife treatment facility. This vehicle helps treat our native animals without having to transport them to a vet clinic, which is incredible work. And we're very lucky to have her here today to speak with us.
Good to be
So,
here. Thanks so much, Zoe.
no worries.
I'm one of the co-founders of the mobile care unit with Joan. So we manage the facility together. Yeah.
Amazing. So, to help this session run smoothly, your cameras and microphones will remain turned off just to keep it going okay. But please feel free to submit questions in the chat and I'll relay them to Lindley at the end of the presentation and we'll try and get through as many questions as possible during our question time. Hopefully we manage to get through them all. I've also put a few helpful links in the chat, so feel free to check out those for some additional information. And finally, just a reminder, Lindley is a professional licensed snake catcher. None of her photos should be replicated, and we encourage you to keep your distance and not to disturb any of our wild snakes that you may come across. If you're concerned, the best thing to do is call a snake catcher.
Perfect advice.
Okay, so I'll hand over to you.
So yes, I feel like I've probably met a lot of you already because I pretty much drive around the suburbs and I can tell, oh, that house I got a death adder from, and that house, we got a red belly black snake that was injured, and so on. So I don't know if any of you recognize me. It'd be nice to know that I'm speaking to some people that I know. Snakes in suburbia. We've got around about 13 common species basically on the northern beaches, which we'll go through with you guys today. Some people think that we're coming across more of them, but in actual fact, what's happening is where a lot of urban expansion overlaps into snake habitat, and that's when you guys are getting interactions with snakes that perhaps you didn't have before. Also, with everything that we do as humans, we attract, we throw out food scraps and so on, and that attracts rats. Sometimes we keep little chooks, and the chook food attracts rats. And even our lovely equine people, they have their horse feeds, stables, and so on, and the rats are attracted there as well. So wherever there's rats, you will find snakes, but they are in fact doing us a giant favor. Obviously, we have things like sheds, like our microhabitats created by us, and that will bring them in as well. So there's basically two reasons that snakes will come into your property, and that's because of a food source and also because of habitat. So they might have little hidey holes somewhere that they might want to stay at your place. And then, of course, we've got seasonal activity patterns. So breeding season, warmer weather, you'll see them a lot more because they are ectothermic, which basically means that they can't thermoregulate themselves. So they have to actually depend on sources like the sun. So as soon as it's nice and hot, their metabolic rate is increased, and so is their activity. So we'll move to the next slide. Fun facts. These are always fun. They smell with their tongue. So you can see this is little Artemis, and she's flicking her tongue in and out. You'll notice that their little tongue is forked, and that's to collect information off the air particles. And they transfer that information from the air particles into the roof of their mouth. Is a little organ called the Jacobson's organ, which is kind of like a processor, and it processes any information that she collects off the air. So they're basically smelling with their tongue. They sense heat. Pythons have little heat sensing pits over here, and they pretty much see things in like an infrared. They shed off their skin in one long piece, which I find very fascinating. Thank goodness humans don't do that, because we'd have like big human-sized skin sheds lying around all over the place instead of just the dust that we make instead. I think I missed out bone count. So sometimes people don't realize that snakes actually have bones, and they just think they're like a long squishy thing, but they have many, 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 many vertebrae, and attached to each one, obviously, we have the ribs. So if they are involved in an accident of some kind, like some kind of trauma, they can have fractures in exactly the same way as we do. So fractured spine, fractured ribs. So yep, they are full of little bones. Their scales are interconnected, and when they ingest a really, really large prey item, you can actually see their scales basically spreading open, and you can see how well they're connected. They're very sensitive. The scales are very sensitive, almost like the tips of your finger. So when you touch one, they definitely feel it. And when we talk about them as being solar powered, as I mentioned before, they're not actually cold-blooded. A lot of people talk about snakes and they call them cold-blooded, but they're actually ectothermic, which essentially means that their blood temperature is the same as the temperature around their body. So if it's really warm around their body, then their blood is nice and warm. And if it's really cold around their body, then their blood is cold. So that is known as ectothermic. And when they sit out in the sun, they absorb the sunshine's warmth, and then they become a lot more active because their metabolic processes are raised. They can't chew per se, and they have to swallow their food whole, which I always think would be hilarious if we pretended to try and be a snake and tied our hands behind our back and tried to eat an entire burger without chewing. I want to try that one day.
Live like a snake.
Yeah. We'll move to the next slide. So a lot of people will say to me, what is the point of snakes? They just roam around trying to bite people. Well, that's definitely not at all true. They don't lie in wait and try and attack us. They're actually super important to our ecosystem. As natural pest controllers, as I mentioned before, wherever you find rats, you'll find the snakes coming to sort out the pests for us. And rats can actually be really bad for us and our pets because they carry diseases like leptospirosis and angiostrongyllitis, which is rat lungworm. And so by eating up these pests, it's they're doing us a lot of good. And we kind of need to stop seeing them as villains and really more heroes, because they're out there doing unpaid work and they really don't ask for much in return, just to be left in peace and to, you know, not have to run into a shovel would be nice. Hey. Yes, they regulate the populations of even lizards. So otherwise, we'd be overrun with lizards and frogs. They also are food themselves for raptors and monitors, bigger snakes. They're really good for obviously our biodiversity. And snake venom is used in a multitude of pharmacological products. So we obviously, the reptile park up in Gosford, they do the snake milking, and that's for anti-venin, just in case somebody does get a bite. So we'll move to the next slide.
I just had a quick question. What are some of their like natural predators? I read at some point that sometimes kookaburras can feed on smaller snakes.
Yeah, so as soon as the reason the mothers give birth or hatch, because not every snake has eggs, some of them are live bearers. So when the babies come out, they have lots of babies because the attrition rate is really high. So kookaburras, currawongs, a lot of the bird species will eat the baby snakes. I've even seen ibises eating the baby snakes,
Wow.
which is a bit sad. Goannas will eat them even when they're in their egg phase, so they haven't even got to hatch at that stage. I caught a goanna the other day, and she came into care, and the first poo that she did was full of reptile eggs. So so the monitors are eating the eggs before the babies even hatch, which is a bit sad. And yeah, so bird species and raptors, and even just bigger snakes. So like a big red belly will eat a little snake. So even its own kind. So you'll see a big red belly eating a little red belly,
Yeah,
or just
wow.
golden crown snakes and even eels and stuff like that. Yeah. So we'll move to the next slide if you guys are cool with that. What to do? Obviously, we always say if you encounter a snake, it really depends on where the snake is. Don't interfere with it. So if you're just out in the bush and you're walking around, just stand back and appreciate the snake. You don't have to get close to it to take a photo. You can just take your photo, but zoom rather than walk towards the snake, because they get panicked by very quick movements. I'm just going to put our little friend away because she's getting very busy. It's illegal to harm or kill a snake. So, and even handling them, you should really be getting a licensed handler to come and collect a snake from your place if it's in imminent danger. So generally, don't panic is the first thing we say. Don't panic. Keep your eye on the snake, and you can call either a licensed cat. Well, you have to call a licensed catcher, but a lot of the time you just need some advice. So you can ring up Sydney Wildlife for advice, or you can ring your local snake catcher for advice. They're not naturally aggressive, but they will defend themselves if they feel cornered or if they feel threatened. So, but the main thing is don't panic. We'll move to the next. So as before, I've said stay calm, keep your distance, even if you need to take a photograph. Basically, they want no interaction from you at all. So if you are nothing to them, so you're not a prey item and you're not a threat, then they will happily just cruise straight past you. Keeping an eye on it is good, so you know exactly where it's gone. If you're out bushwalking or hiking, you can take a compression bandage with you, which is just there for for safety. But I always wear sturdy shoes, nice thick socks, long pants. I mean, obviously it's difficult when it's really hot. You want to wear your shorts. But basically when you're stomping around, they can feel the vibrations, and mostly they will move off even before you've seen them. But given that snakes don't have eyelids, it's hard to tell if they're asleep or not. So you might actually come across a sleeping snake, but you don't know it's asleep because they don't have eyelids, so they don't have closed eyes. So the best thing to do is, make a little bit of vibration, and it might just like, oh, realize you're there, and then give it some space just to move off of its own accord. We'll move to the next slide. If it's inside your house, it's a very different thing once a snake has come inside. Now, I'll point out at this stage that most snakes end up inside because your pet dog or your pet cat has maybe brought them inside. So it's a good time to ring Sydney Wildlife Rescue at that stage, because there's a pretty good chance that interaction between the pet and the snake has caused an injury to the snake. So we like to come and check to make sure that they're okay. And so they will also sometimes come inside if it's really hot outside and they will just find some shade, or if they're looking for water. If you do find one inside, don't panic. Contain your pets and kids and screaming spouses. And you can either keep an eye on the snake and its whereabouts, but if you're not comfortable doing that, then close the door to the room that it's in, put a towel rolled up at the bottom of the door, and call for a licensed snake catcher. It's always good to keep an eye on where the snake is. Otherwise, if we arrive at your house and we've got to search through decades worth of items of clothing and furniture to try and find this little creature. So keeping your eye on it would be really helpful. Once the snake is gone, once we've removed the snake for you and checked that it's not injured, then you can always try and have a look at where you think the snake has entered from. And, having things like those little door stoppers or fly screens or something like that will help to prevent them coming inside. But a lot of the time, as I say, they do get brought in by pets. So make sure that you're not getting brought little presents. And if the little presents are arriving, then make sure that you call Sydney Wildlife Rescue. So we'll move on. Now, what not to do? Obviously, getting up close and in their face. They don't like panic movements, and they don't like to have interactions with humans. They find you guys very scary. So if you do need to take a photo for identification purposes, just take a photo from afar, and then if you need to zoom in and do that. Poking them and pestering them and using household items to try and shift them outdoors is a big no-no. They're actually quite delicate, and if you use something like, I know people like to use like the barbecue tongs and stuff like that, which is horrible for them. They feel pain just like any other animal. So holding them with household items is definitely no good. So trying to catch it yourself, again, you have to be licensed to interact with them. And don't try and return. So we've moved on to sea snakes. So if you see a sea snake that's washed up on the beach, don't try and pick it up by the tail. Basically, their tail is their method of locomotion, and it's very delicate. So you don't want to pick them up by the tail because you will definitely injure the snake. Also, they are highly venomous, so you shouldn't be interacting with the snake. We're on good terms with a lot of the surf lifesaving clubs, and they tend to put up a barrier for us and give us a call, and we come down, and they do a bit of crowd control as well. And we come down and we collect the sea snake. Now, they can often look completely dead when you see them on the beach, but they can, in fact, reanimate quite well in fresh water. And we give them fresh water because they're often very dehydrated when they first come in. So sea snakes are super interesting. That's probably a whole new webinar. I could talk forever about sea snakes. But essentially, they are air breathers. So if they are tumbled around in the waves, so if you try and throw them back into the waves, they can actually drown, which is very strange for most people because they're like, but they belong in the ocean. But most of our species are known as pelagic, which means they live out their whole life in open water. So they don't really have to deal with waves and watercraft and people and stuff like that. So if you see a sea snake, just give us a call, and or just let your surf life saving club know, and they generally know who to call as well.
Yeah.
So,
We did have a question asking if you can tell us what species of snakes are shown on the slides. Sorry,
oh,
that's my
okay.
mistake. I should have labeled them.
This one is not a sea snake. This one's a bandy, which, believe it or not, is actually classified as an elapid, which means it's a venomous snake. But they're they're known as fossorial, which means they essentially live underground. If you have a look at a bandy's face, it's very rounded. They got like a little, their scales are very, very small and shiny, which helps them to, helps their basically to live underground. And they basically live on blind snakes. It's pretty much their primary diet. So we'll get to bandies, but that one's a bandy, one of my favorites. It looks like licorice, all sorts.
It does.
So snake safe landscaping. We hate those sticky insect traps or any kind of chemicals around the house. They're really bad, not just for snakes, but for most wildlife. So try not to use those. Wildlife friendly fencing or netting is super important. So it's the really fine netting, almost like a lady's stocking, so they can't get their little head or stuck in the netting, because that's very unforgiving. A lot of those have no stretch at all, so it's very unforgiving for them, and they get horribly tangled, and they can end up with really horrid constriction injuries. If you hop onto our Sydney Wildlife Rescue website, it'll show you a type of wildlife-friendly netting. Safe corridors. Now, not everyone wants to discourage snakes from their property, I'd like to think. Recently, I've had a lot of people saying, oh, we'd like to encourage snakes into our property. So you'll notice if you watch a snake, they like to basically, I call it doing border patrol. So they like to hug a wall or a fence. So being out in the open, they find that quite scary and they feel very vulnerable. So if you plant along the edges of your property like nice shrubs that they can kind of move in and out of and keep nice and safe, so the birds are not seeing them and your pets are not seeing them, and they generally can move safely along the corridor of shrubs towards like a nearby creek. That's really nice for them, but they really don't like to be out in the open. So if you can create nice little corridors for them, that would be helpful. If you're trying to discourage them from your property, we suggest not having too much debris around. Keep your grass nice and short, so there's nowhere for them to hide. I build lots of little hidey holes in my backyard so that I can attract them in. Some people inadvertently build like a snake paradise by making like retaining walls that are north facing and made of rock and then wonder why there's so many snakes around. So they do love the little crevices in the rock walls. So if you're trying to discourage them, then maybe don't build north-facing rock crevices. As I say, keeping your yard tidy and clean. Don't throw out food scraps. Try not to keep your pets' food outside, because that also attracts rats, which again attracts the snakes. So that was in that slide was a diamond python. The picture of this snake, that's a juvenile eastern brown snake, which most people are very surprised about because it's got beautiful bands and a dark head, which is not what people are expecting. But that's essentially what they look like. Not all of them are banded. Some of them are born just with a dark head, but it will help with that identification if you take a photo. So I think I already said keeping your pet food inside and cleaning up all the crumbs that they leave behind. Keep your grass nice and short. As I said, if there's no way for them to hide, then they're generally not going to stick around. I have mentioned sealing entry points to your home, but sometimes it's lovely to just have the doors and windows open. So don't let it rule your life. The amount of snakes that actually come inside houses are probably fairly minimal. And if they do, then you know who to call. Choosing ground cover, gravel and small tight rocks instead of like the bigger, larger rocks will discourage them. But if you want them to come into your yard, then by all means, like build up the nice big rocks and create lovely habitat for them. Yeah, cleaning up seeds and compost is going to detract your rodents, so that'll, you know. It also, ratters, a lot of people don't love the goannas, but the goannas are fantastic for cleaning up the rats. So if you've got rats, then you're more than likely going to end up with some goannas as well as snakes, which I think is fabulous. Moving on to the next slide. Okay, so we've got about 13 common local snakes. Probably the ones that I come across the most are red belly black snakes and diamond pythons, but there's everything in between. They'll all have like a venom rating. We've essentially only got 2 non-venomous, well, 3 if you count the blind snakes, but everything else ranges from mildly venomous to dangerously venomous. But even the ones that are considered dangerously venomous are in a big hurry to get the heck away from you. So in most cases, my advice is the only snake that is dangerous is the one with which you are interfering. So if you don't interfere with them, then there's no danger. So the snake in this background slide is a red belly black snake. So we'll get around to that one next. I think we're starting with, yep. So this is by far and away my favorite. They are a front-fanged elapid, which means they have front fangs and they're venomous. They're probably the easiest one to identify. Beautiful glossy black, lovely red down you'd see the red down the lateral scales. Fun fact, they used to be known as the crimson-sided snake because not all of them have a red belly. And in fact, when a red belly black snake is going into a skin shed, the red can often disappear completely. So it can actually look like white. So people are saying, but it's a red, I thought it was a red belly, but it doesn't have any red. It's white there instead. So that can be if they're going into a skin shed. They're excellent swimmers, which often people don't think of snakes as good swimmers. They've got that adorable little rounded nose, which you can see there. Pretty shy. They will much rather retreat than head towards you, unless, of course, you have cornered it, and it'll try and lunge past you. Males will engage in ritual combat, which is fascinating to see. They roll around each other and they head pin each other, and they're just basically trying to assert dominance over each other. And they don't care what's in their way. They will knock over pot plants and your favorite little garden gnomes, and everything in their path will just get flattened. The grass will be flattened. They are hilarious when they're in combat. They really just don't care. And there's somewhere hiding in the bushes is a poor female who is getting a headache, I'm sure, just by watching these 2 males combating. They are live bearers, so they don't lay eggs. And so they birth beautiful little babies, sometimes anything from 4 to, I believe, up to 40 babies. And they dissipate the second they are born. They break out of a little membranous sac, and they wriggle out of the little membranous sac, and pretty quickly they either get picked off by kookaburras or they scarper underneath the leaf litter, and hopefully at least 20% make it to adulthood. The next snake is, we still got red bellies.
Oh, sorry, I've got a bunch of beautiful red belly photos.
Oh, we've got some glorious photos. Like Jaden is one of I would say he's a snake expert, much more of an expert than me, and he takes the most glorious photos. I see you've included lots of amazing photos there by Brendan as well. Good photos, Zoe. So you can see there, if you just go back, maybe just go back. If you look at a snake's face and the top of their head, they have different scales. So there's like nasal scales, rostral scales, I've forgotten the name now. There's parietal scales. There's all different types of scales, and you can actually tell when you get a snake skin. You can actually tell what snake has come out of that snake by looking at the different scales on their head, and even the subcaudals below the cloaca, which is their bottom, basically. You can move to the next one. So as Sydney Wildlife Rescue gets involved with the rescue of injured and sick snakes. So you can see they often get caught in netting. Sometimes they come in with protozoal infections, or they just, most of the time, they are victims of trauma. So you can see us in the mobile care unit there with our volunteer vets. We will get the snake into a transparent tube, and that makes it safe for the vets, and it also makes it safe for the snake. Occasionally, we might have to hold them by the head to get some medication into them. Oral medication is always the most fun. But they get a lot of net caught injuries, which is known as ischemia reperfusion injury, which is, again, another webinar in itself. But we have to cut them out. So we can head to the next slide. Eastern brown snakes, beautiful photo as well, Zoe. They can be any shade. Like I had a really, really dark one that was almost black in color. And often they will actually get a lot darker in color as they're coming into a skin shed. So you can't really tell if a snake is a brown snake just based on color. I know it makes it difficult. We don't get that many on the northern beaches, I'll be honest. Little disappointing, but we don't. Small pockets, we find them in very small pockets in Davidson and probably Terry Hills, but really maybe around Manly Dam, but we don't find them up around Avalon and Palm Beach and those sorts of areas. Well, I haven't come across them. And they actually prefer a different type of habitat anyway. So northern beaches is basically at the moment full of trees and nice little riparian zones, creeks, that kind of thing, which is more red belly territory. They like more, browns prefer like an open, more open paddocks. Juvenile brown snakes, I think we'll probably come onto another slide, which I think we spoke about before, with their different colorations. But sometimes legless lizards can be mistaken for brown snakes. And legless lizards are another webinar, which that might be our next one, sorry. Legless lizards.
That'd be very interesting.
They look very much like a snake. You would think that a snake was a legless lizard. A few more pictures there of snakes that have got themselves into a spot of bother. That one where you can see the vet has the blue gloves on. That was a shovel-induced injury, sadly, and it had to have its wound debrided because it got all infected. So the wound was debrided and she had to go on antibiotics, and it was all a bit horrible for the poor snake. But we did get that one back to full health, and it was able to be released, which was great. The one that I'm holding in that picture, myself and Kobe went out to get that one. It was right, you can see it's right opposite the IGA. It was in a very, very scary area for a snake. Lots and lots of construction. There was a childcare center across the road, traffic everywhere. So we had to try and save that poor thing from getting squashed. That's the little juvenile one in the middle there with the beautiful banding. But you can see it fades a little bit with age, but it can also stay in sort of silvery patterning, which is pretty cute.
Oh, wow.
We'll head to the next slide. Yellow-faced whip snake. Now, this to me always makes me think of a little girl who's gone and raided her mum's makeup drawer, put a little bit too much eyeliner on, started with the black and ended up with the white, and put some black lipstick on. So they're pretty easy to spot based on that, almost like a little comma around their eye. They do get mistaken for brown snakes just based on the fact that their coloration is sort of that beautiful olivey color. But if you look at them in the sun, they've got almost like a rainbow sheen to them. They feed on lizards, frogs, like small little reptiles. And they are venomous, but their venom is not considered medically significant to the average human. Of course, you can get people who might have like a reaction to the venom. So you always have to be, you can't just go, oh, it's just mildly venomous, I'll just boop it on the snout, which obviously we do not recommend at any stage. We can move to the, look at that. See, she's gotten into the makeup drawer.
Mm-hmm. She looks beautiful.
She does. And she's got the little black and white stripe across the rostral region there,
Mm.
which I think is beautiful. And they're very fast, super crazy fast. They're literally impossible to catch. You've got to be pretty speedy. We'll move to the next species. Oh, golden crown snakes. These are numpties because they always end up somehow in a swimming pool. Whenever someone says, oh, there's a brown snake or there's a baby red-bellied black snake in my swimming pool or in my skimmer box, guaranteed it's going to be a golden crown snake. And you can easily see the beautiful creamy crown around the top of its head. And it's got teeny, weeny, weeny little eyes. Very, very endearing little animals. But they do love to bluff. So they'll come up and they'll be like, oh, I'm so scary, even though they're this big. And they'll, you know, do the full bluff routine. I'm going to kill you. And you're all of like that size. Beautiful little animals, very like lovely sort of salmon colored belly, which is why they get mistaken for a baby red belly. But it's very easy to see from the crown on their little head that they are the golden crown snakes, and they are nocturnal. So if you see a little snake moving around at night and it's got a beautiful little creamy crown, you know that you are being visited by one of these special little animals. Mildly venomous, again, but their venom is not considered medically significant to humans. Some more pictures of crownies. You can see them coming up like that, and they'll waver around and try and pretend to be scary, but to me, they're adorable. Again, beautiful pictures there, Zoe. Moving to the next one. Oh, so brown tree snakes in certain areas are also known as night tigers. Beautiful coloration. They're almost like a houndstooth. They almost have like a houndstooth design. If you take a photo of one and you go on Google Pics or something like that, where you try and identify it, sometimes they'll identify it as a death adder, which is hilarious because often the animal will be sitting up in a tree, and death adders do not sit up in trees. But for some reason, it gets misidentified. They've been known to be bad-tempered, but I just like to call them actively defensive. They've got beautiful big boggly eyes. Sometimes they'll generally come into your house at nighttime if they're chasing after a prey item. So you might find them in your laundry, and they love to S up like this. And again, they're just trying to pretend to be scary. They are what's known as a colubrid or colubrid, and they have their fangs are more at the back of the mouth as opposed to an elapid, which has fangs at the front. And they feed on birds and small mammals and so on. But they will sometimes be in roof spaces. But yeah, they're absolutely beautiful, but actually relatively rare to see one. They are out there, but because they're nocturnal and they're generally an arboreal, like tree-dwelling species, not many people have the joy of interacting with one. So I don't know if we've got more pictures. Yeah, it's Jaden, another of Jaden's pics, where it's seems to be swallowing a prey item there. And you can see that the scales are spreading nicely there as it's ingesting that prey item. And marsh snakes. Oh my gosh. Again, I love these little critters. I know I love them all, but they've got racing stripes on the side of their face. So another little one that always gets mistaken for a brown snake. But if you look at the side, you can actually see the little stripes on its face. The other name is black-bellied swamp snake. You will probably never get the opportunity to see their little belly, but they have a beautiful black, silvery black belly. And I always try and show people that if I'm catching one. There might be another slide of them that shows the white lines along the face. There we go. Beautiful little racing stripes. And so that instantly will tell you that that is not a baby brown. We'll move to the next slide. Oh, okay. The bandy we did kind of talk about earlier. Gorgeous little fossorial critters, so underground dwellers. Super lucky if you ever get to see one. Like, I think I've literally caught 2 or maybe 3 ever. on the northern beaches, and it's only because they've been brought indoors by cats or dogs or whatever the case may be. They may have just snuck indoors to chase after a blind snake. um, they they're referred to as Ophiophagous, and that's Ophio means of a snake, phagus means eater. So they will eat snakes, and they do their little burrowing at nighttime. So someone saw one on their driveway and thought that it was a belt. Thought someone had dropped their belt on the driveway, so they jumped out the car and like, oh, we better go and pick up that belt, and then the belt moved. So I got called out to that little beautiful animal, and I think they're also one of my favorites. Mildly venomous, but again, not considered dangerous to humans. We can move to the next one. Oh, there we go. Some more beautiful photos by Jaden and Brendan.
Yeah, I couldn't resist putting these in. I just love the way their body kind of kinks upward like that. I think that's
Yes,
incredibly cool.
that's a defensive move. So they try and what they try and do is confuse a predator by getting into those arches, and it kind of like dizzy. You know how like when if you're ironing a shirt that's stripy, it makes you dizzy. It's kind of the same with the stripy snakes like that. It kind of makes the predators feel a bit dizzy. So
Yeah.
quite clever.
Yeah, it's a great tactic.
Even their little tongue goes from black to white.
Oh, it does too.
And each of
Very
them is
cute.
very individual. Like I know you think it just looks like black and white, but they can have very individual patterning as well.
A little bit like a
So
zebra. None of them are the same.
yeah, exactly the same. Yeah. So shifting on to what have we got next? It's like a lucky dip. I don't know what we got. Oh, Eastern small-eyed snake. I think I've literally been called to two of these ever. Just so cryptic. And we just hardly ever come across them. Small-eyed snake. Most people have never even heard of them. And so they go, small-eyed snake, never heard of them. They can look like I guess a red-bellied black snake, a small red-bellied black snake, because they're dark on top and they're pinky at the bottom, but very different and completely nocturnal. So you, again, be so lucky to see one. We only see them when we go looking for snakes. So we can probably shift because you're highly unlikely to ever come across one. We'll move to the next species. What's coming up, Zoe? What's next? Have we got a problem with our slides?
Oh, it's changed on my end.
Oh, it's still the same one for me.
Let me just.
Ah, okay, another picture of the small-eyed. Dinging. We can, as it move to the next one.
Yeah, it has on my end. Might just need
Okay, so
to.
now I'm seeing a tiger snake. Yes.
There we go.
Lovely, beautiful, beefy tiger snakes. Again, we really don't get too many of them on the northern beaches. I wish we got more. Super highly intelligent. If you've got a beautiful old mature snake on your property, they've probably been sitting there and taking notes. If they could hold a pen in their mouth, they would be taking notes on who lives here, what time they go to work, and that kind of thing. They're very observant, and they will sort of stay in their little hidey hole until everyone's gone off to work or school or whatever, and then they'll come out for a little bask. It was interesting during COVID to note that people were seeing more snakes, but what actually was happening was that people weren't going to work. So the snakes were like, dang it, I'm going to have to come out and bask while the people are here. And then they were noticing that snakes were suddenly in their backyard. But of course, this was just their resident snake that was coming out for a bask because no one was going to work or school anymore. But lovely animals, the tiger snakes, obviously highly venomous, so no touchy. There's a beautiful little youngster there sitting in the leaf litter trying to blend in with the surrounds, and they do actually blend in pretty well. That's our beautiful common death adder. There's essentially two colorations. So you get the red phase and you get the gray phase death adder.
Oh, I've got a beautiful picture of that. Here we go.
Of the red phase. Oh, yay! And we do have quite a few of them on the northern beaches. But again, they stay very well hidden. So the chances of ever coming across one are fairly nominal. They have a tiny home range, tiny home range. So it could have, you might come across one, but it's probably been living in your backyard all its life and just managed to escape any kind of detection until that moment that you see it. Got a big fat triangular head, which makes them easy to discern from anything else. And their tails are fascinating to me. They use something called caudal luring. So they use their little tail and they hide under the leaf litter and they'll wiggle that little tail to look either like a worm or they'll flutter it to make it look like a moth, depending on what the prey item is that's coming down to catch that worm or moth, and they will rise up out of the leaf litter and grab whatever it is that's trying to eat their tail, which I think is ingenious, really. In that picture, we have a death adder in a tube. As I said before, we keep the vets nice and safe, and the snakes are nice and safe as well. That particular animal had been in care and was about to be released, but we microchipped her before release. And we have actually come across that particular individual twice since release, and basically she hardly moves more than 50 meters. So interesting. Love the death adders,
Yeah,
absolute stunners.
they're very beautiful.
I recognize this snake. She was sitting on top of one of the signs at one of the I think it was one of the ovals. Diamond pythons are probably the one that most people have seen. The average size is sort of 2 meters, and they can weigh up to 4 or 5 kilos. The biggest individual I've ever caught was 10.6 kilos, which was phenomenal. She was the most glorious animal you've ever seen in your
Wow.
whole life.
Yeah, that's huge. Wow.
She was massive, and she was found on the Monavale Road upgrade. So they were obviously grading to make the road bigger, and she was there. And the guys were like, "Nope, you have to come and shift her, because otherwise she's going to get squashed by the diggers." And they said, "Have you got a Doona-sized catching bag?" I'm like, "Come on, she can't be that big." And when I got there, I was like, "Whoa!" She is pretty big, but she had the most gorgeous nature. And we called her Brienne of Tarth. If anyone's watched Game of Thrones, they'll know who Brienne of Tarth is. A big warrior lady. And she was amazing. And we've come across her multiple times over the years. So we come across each other. We have a bit of a chat. She moves on. Then I come across her again in a couple of years' time. We have a chat. She moves on. So she's also microchipped, so I know exactly who she is. Diamond pythons, when they lay eggs, they will actually coil around their eggs, and they will do like a shivering thing to kind of keep them at a reasonable and constant temperature. What you're seeing there, juvenile, you might see a couple of juveniles around at the moment because the eggs are out there and they're hatching. So that's a bit exciting. So we've actually seen a couple of little juvenile ones coming out. And that one that I'm holding in the van, I think she'd been run over by a car, but she was okay. Believe it or not, she was okay. They can be quite hardy, which is fantastic. At least they're not bulletproof because, as I said before, snakes can be quite delicate, but definitely worth. And if you find one dead on the road around about this time of the year, worth getting in touch with us anyway, because the females might be gravid, which means pregnant. And even though mum has been killed, it's still possible at this stage to get the vet to remove the eggs from their oviducts and incubate them. And the babies can still survive. The reason we've got the coastal carpet python in here is because they're a pet that people will regularly donate to the wild, for want of a better way of putting it. So they do get big and they do get a little bit snappy, the coastals. So people will sometimes think it's okay to release them, which obviously it's not. If you find one like this that doesn't match the diamond python patterning, give us a call or call your local licensed catcher. And yeah, they have to basically be rehomed. Very similar, though, to the diamond python. So sometimes it's hard to tell. We can move on to, haha, the common tree snake. Totally non-venomous and super speedy as well. They almost fly through the branches of the trees. It's wonderful to see. But if they think they haven't been spotted, they will sit in the trees like this, and they will like just kind of wave back and forth and pretend they're like a twig, just sort of swaying in the breeze. They have that beautiful yellow throat, and they can range in color from, like, when they're first born, they can be really dark, almost black on the top, but the giveaway is the beautiful yellow throat here, like this. They're a strong swimmer. They're often, they're arboreal, which means they live in trees usually, but they will come to ground to hunt. So you might find them around ponds and water sources. And they love their frogs. Often people are interested to see that they have these lumps under their skin. It's not just the tree snakes. It's often the red bellies as well. It's often the frog-eating species. They get something called sparganosis, which actually comes from eating frogs. So it's like a worm under their skin. So there's some beautiful pictures of our local tree snakes. And they're also a favorite species of mine. That little one was brought inside and had a tail injury, unfortunately. But we can make them better depending on the severity of the injury.
Yeah, they are beautiful, these little ones.
So cute. And the babies are like shoelaces with attitude.
Oh.
Literally shoelace with attitude, but darn sweet. Blind snake. The most dangerous thing about a blind snake is the stank that they put on you. So if you ever had the joy of picking up a blind snake, they will put a stink on you that will make you want to barf. They are very cute to look at. Extremely, you can see the little rounded face, which is, again, something which little fossorial snakes will have. So they live underground, so their little faces for burrowing through the sand. Sometimes they get called a pot, what do they call them? Flower pot snake. People often think they're a worm, but they're actually a snake. You can see their little scales, little individual scales, even though they're very shiny and smooth. That's for being underground, so that the sand doesn't get all stuck in their little scales. And they do have a little pointy tail, which when you pick them up, they'll like try and poke you with their little pointy end of their tail to try and say, "Hey, let me go." And when you don't let them go, then they'll stink you. So, and they are eaten by the bandies. So they can be prey for other critters as well, but the bandies love to eat blind snakes. Very, very cute animals as well. So sea snakes, one of the things I love about sea snakes is just they're so entirely different from anything else, and yet very much the same. So they are the same in that they breathe air and they drink fresh water, which people will say, how in the heck do they drink fresh water if they live pelagically in the ocean? Well, they wait for the rain to fall, and it sits on top of the ocean, and they drink from the top of the ocean. They have the paddle tail, which is their form of locomotion. We don't often get sea snakes washing up here. They're probably from further north. We probably tend to get more of the yellow-bellied sea snakes here. But if you find one, that's one that was in care, was actually rescued by Hunter Wildlife, and then it came down to us because we wanted to ultrasound her and make sure she was okay. And then we had to drive her another 5 hours to get back up north. And the water police are extremely good to us. They always allow us to go out in their boat with them, and they take us multiple nautical miles offshore so that we can get them back into open ocean. So that one was being released after 3 weeks in care. That was with Dan from Hunter Wildlife, and then was only with me for about a week. So I can't take credit for that one. I only had her for an ultrasound purpose, but then I had the joy of releasing her. So, but Dan was the man there. I think the next one is probably yellow-bellied sea snake. Yeah. So yellow-bellied sea snakes are probably the one we'll find most commonly thrown up onto our beaches here. As I said, they're pelagic, so they tend to be out in the open ocean all the time. very distinctive. You'll see they're black on the top and yellow, either just down the side or usually like on the bottom yellow, hence the name yellow-bellied. They are laterally compressed, so almost like a boat that has like the keel down here. So when they get onto land, they kind of, they can't really like slither, so they kind of like go onto the side like this. Very different from a sea crate, which a sea crate can actually happily be on land, move on land as well as in the ocean. But sea snakes, being true sea snakes, they can't really move on land particularly well. They can, however, last for many, many days. People will often walk past them and think they're dead. We had a gravid, which means pregnant. We had a gravid female come in last season, and she'd been lying on the beach for close to 3 days, and everyone thought she was dead. We did finally have someone reported her. We went and got her, and she had 6 beautiful little babies inside her waiting to be born. But by that stage, she was horribly dehydrated and quite debilitated at that stage. So she spent a number of weeks in care, and she actually birthed those adorable little creatures in care. And her little tackers were all released out to sea once she was better. Aren't
Oh,
they
that's
gorgeous?
amazing. Yeah,
Yeah.
incredibly distinctive, so beautiful.
Someone gets to see one day, but you can see that picture of it looking like it's sitting in an aquarium. That's that's my tank that I use for the sea snakes when they're coming in for rehabilitation. And they quite like it. They got a little basking area there. Obviously, it's weird for them because they're used to the open ocean, but sometimes they love it. They just sit there with their head on the platform and they just kind of do this with their tail, and they're actually quite gregarious. So if I get more than one into care at a time, and I discovered this by listening to Nicola. Nicola Martin was a real expert on these guys. She had 2 older ladies that came in together, and she thought, I wonder if I put them together. And they absolutely loved being together. So if I get 2 into care, I'll put them in together, and they will generally enjoy each other's company. So thanks, Nicola. She did the research, and we benefit from it. So
Absolutely.
yeah. And we can move on to the next one. Oh, some of my favorite rescues: the snake in a mailbox, snake in a drawer, snake on a boat. Well, we often get called out to snakes actually on a boat in the water out in the bay. So
Oh, wow.
marine rescue have taken a few of us out before to rescue snakes off boats, which
Wow.
is pretty funny. And that one was, we called it Slash because it obviously quite liked the guitar. It was in a teenage boy's bedroom, which was probably way more dangerous than the actual snake itself. Walking into a teenage boy's bedroom, there's a special kind of smell. I think that brings us to the end of the slides. You're probably sick to death of hearing me hopping on. If anyone's got questions, have we got time?
Yeah, we will probably run a little overtime, but I think that's okay. I will
If I have,
have a look and read through some of these questions that we've got.
okay.
Juliet has asked if the bandy snake is endangered.
Not endangered. It's just rare to see based on the fact that it's nocturnal and fossorial. So, if they come out from underground to look for blind snakes, then you'd be lucky to see one. But we tend to see them in the national parks more than, I've got my little friend out again, more than you would see them in suburban areas. But we have come across them coming to drink out of a doggy bowl. The owner of the property was very smart, and they saw the snake coming to drink from the doggy bowl, allowed the animal to have a drink, and then popped a big crate over the top of it to protect it from his dogs, which were sniffing around and getting very interested. And he called and said, I'm not sure if my dogs have interacted with them, but maybe if you can check, that'd be great. So we did that, but no, I wouldn't say endangered.
Yeah. So Andrew has asked, what snakes do you typically find in a roof space?
Mostly just our arboreal species, because they are, used to being up in trees. So we'll find diamond pythons, common tree snakes, brown tree snakes. That's not to say that the occasional brown snake might get it, but very unusual. But it's generally our arboreal species. So you get the arboreal ones, which like to be up high, and then you get terrestrial ones, which like to basically be on the ground.
Mhm.
In our area, it's pretty much diamonds and tree snakes. Yeah.
Yeah. Nick has asked how big or how large do the ranges of these snakes get? How big is their typical territory?
They have a home range, and it's very dependent on the species. So a very small snake, like a golden crown snake, for example, would have a tiny home range, which would probably be like backyard size, and they would live their whole life just in a backyard. So you wouldn't really want to move them very far. So if they've fallen into your swimming pool, you can obviously, we would generally scoop them out and sort of suggest that they just go back into the garden because that's where they live. Um, if it's something like a diamond python, they have a much bigger home range, and it also is gender specific. So the boys will have a bigger home range than the girls. So it can be a good few hectares for a diamond python, but they'll move around different parts of their home range depending on how they, if it's like breeding season, then they'll obviously move. They'll cross over into each other's home ranges as well. So the boys will, if the boys are looking for the girls, they'll cross over, which is obviously how males end up in combat with each other because they've crossed over into each other's home ranges. So it's very, very much species dependent. So, which is one of the reasons we always say, please get a snake to call a licensed catcher, because we know the rules around where you would release a specific species within their home range. If you take, for example, a marsh snake, which has a tiny home range, and drive it like 2 kilometers away, that poor thing is going to basically just die trying to get back to its home range. So not doing that poor little animal any favors. So we like to make sure that the licensed catchers always are involved with releasing snakes. Yeah.
Yeah. And so people have been asking how do they call a licensed snake catcher? What
Um,
number do they call?
so I guess there's various situations in which you would call for a catcher. If the animal is injured, or it's in imminent danger, or you reckon it's sick, or there's potential that it's had an interaction with your pet, then you would call Sydney Wildlife Rescue, which is 94134300. If it's just a snake that's chilling in your backyard and you're like just not all that keen to have it there, you could call a professional catcher like Sydney Snake Catcher. They're a company that has a really large network of individual catchers, and they can call on any number of individual catchers just to make sure that you get a snake catcher to you really quickly. So I think we'll most probably link Sydney Snake Catcher and some of the local catchers afterwards for you
Yeah.
guys.
Yeah.
I think they're 1-300-599-3538.
Mm.
Sorry, I'll check on that. But yeah, if you just want advice, you can ring Sydney Wildlife. But if you know for a fact that it's just a snake you want moved on, then call a local catcher. I think it's listed as well on New South Wales and environment page, but we'll link
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, I put a link at the start of the talk that links to both Wires and Sydney Wildlife Rescue, and also the list of New South Wales licensed snake catchers as well.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah. We've got a question here asking about what happens when a snake is found and relocated. Do they often come back to where they were found, or how far do they travel?
It's a very good question, because, again, dependent on the species, sometimes they will want to come back to their home range. But if you take them to the edge of their home range and they realize, oh, okay, I've been moved to this part of my home range, they might stick around. But occasionally they will come back, diamond pythons in particular. We know this because we've microchipped a couple of our patients that come into the mobile care unit. And with the microchip, we can see obviously when they pop up, and we know exactly who it is. So the repeat offenders come back. And we've got one particular property in Dendrobium or Caledenia Close in Eleanor Heights. that snake, it comes back every 3 months, like clockwork. So we just move her to the edge of her home range, and it takes her a little while, but she always ends up back, and we run the microchip scanner over her. Yep, it's the same girl again. So yes, depending on species, they will occasionally come back. Something like a red belly usually is just moving through your property. They really have no intention of sticking around. They want to get to a riparian zone, like a creek, where they can find their prey items. So usually they're not hanging around. If they are hanging around, then that's when we question, are they unwell? Have they gone into a skin shed? Are they perhaps getting ready to birth babies? So there's a lot of questions around why they would be hanging around in the backyard, because they are a species would usually just be moving through. So again, species specific, sorry, not a very good answer.
We've got another question here about whether using thick gloves and thick clothes can reduce your chances of being bitten. I assume this is if people are doing gardening and they're worried there might be a snake in their garden.
Yep, absolutely. When you're doing your gardening, some good thick gloves, wear your long sleeves, your long pants. Generally, if you're making a big racket, that's when the snakes will get unearthed. So that's often when we find death adders coming out into the open, because they're like, you've been scooping up leaf litter, and they've gone, oh crikey, my little hidey hole has disappeared, and they might just sit there and try and pretend that you can't see them in the open. So always good to be wearing protective gear when you're gardening, and even when you're bushwalking. But don't leave your shoes outside. So a lot of people leave their shoes outside. They'll have the good thick sturdy shoes, but then they leave them out their front door. And then snakes go, oh, there's a nice little hidey hole, and spiders as well, and they
Yeah,
clamber into your shoes. So
absolutely.
try not to leave the shoes outside.
Mm.
We've done a few
Yeah.
rescues.
We also have a specific question here about what to do about a death adder that's hidden in their garden. They're worried about their dogs and their grandkids.
Okay, so if you've spotted the death adder, it probably has lived forever and ever in your yard, but they can obviously be moved within their home range, because that is obviously an animal that, I mean, as much as they don't want an interaction, sometimes dogs will interact with them first. So they would, feel the need to sorry, I'm getting kisses here. They would feel the need to defend themselves. So yeah, your licensed catcher will know exactly where to move them to, and we're always happy to answer questions. If people are scared about something like that, then they can be shifted into other areas of their home range. Good question. And then you can use methods to like exclude them, like maybe keep the area free of leaf litter and that kind of thing as well. Similarly, if you want to attract them to your backyard, then don't bother raking, because they do
Um,
like the leaf litter.
yeah. We have a question about how do you become a snake catcher?
So if you want to become, so I got my catch and release license about 15 years ago. You have to apply through national parks to get a catch and release license. If you want to become a snake rescuer, which is obviously rescuing injured and sick snakes and rehabilitating them to get them back into the wild, then you can consider joining Sydney Wildlife Rescue. You can go jump onto our website. Obviously, there's Sydney Wildlife and Wires are the two organisations that have volunteers. But if you want to become a licensed paid professional, then you just apply through national parks. So they will. There are courses you can do to learn how to basically catch and release venomous animals. Yeah. So I've done quite a few of the courses, but I love to do the rehab. So yeah.
Yeah, amazing. I've got a question about whether there's a snake catcher that's funded by council or is there a fee to pay them if you have to call them out? There isn't any snake catchers funded by council, which is why we recommend ringing Sydney Wildlife Rescue or Wires or having a look at that link I sent with the list of licensed snake catchers.
Yeah. let's say Sydney Snake Catcher has a big network of individual snake catchers, so you can ring them and they can get somebody from your area quickly.
Mm. Oh, we probably only have time for one or two questions, but this one here is quite interesting. This person, John, says they have a pond in their backyard and they found a black snake there. How far distant can snakes detect water, and would that be the reason there was a snake in their backyard?
Ponds attract frogs, and frogs are a delicacy for a lot of snakes. So it's probably the frogs that's actually attracted the snake to that area. Um, I would say, and even fish. So if you've got fish in your pond, then some certain species of snakes will eat the fish as well. But a lot of our snakes, unfortunately, get into trouble when people decide to put netting across their pond. It would have to be wildlife friendly netting, but I would say that the snake has been attracted by frogs. So that's probably the reason that you have a black snake coming to your pond. You could always just enjoy them until they decide to go away.
Mm.
But I know a lot of people are not crazy about having a red belly black snake by their pond. The
Mm.
tree snakes will come to the ponds as well for the frogs. So they're cute to watch. Very cute to watch when they're catching the frogs. Sorry, frogs. You
The
love
pond,
frogs too.
yeah, ponds definitely make a perfect little feeding spot for our snakes.
Again, providing habitat and food in one place,
Yeah.
I guess. So,
Mm. Yeah. And I
is
think I
there?
might have to make this my last question. Someone has asked in the chat if there are any plants that could help snakes to survive or support them in their garden.
Um, like nice low shrubbery will keep a nice keep it a nice hidey place for them to be. I know people with agapanthus always end up with snakes in their agapanthus, but low-lying shrubs are probably your best bet for providing like a nice hiding place for them. As I said, if you want to give them a corridor through your backyard, place all your shrubs along the fence line because they like to travel along the fences because they feel much safer that way. And they don't like to come out into the open wherever possible because they feel very vulnerable to predation by birds and even interactions with humans and pets. So if you plant anything that's low-lying shrubbery, then they will enjoy that. Yeah.
Lovely.
And it'll probably also provide a few little prey items for them as well. So you're giving them dinner and a show.
Yeah,
We'll
dinner
drive
and a
through.
home. Lovely.
Drive through maggots.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think that's where we might finish it.
Sorry, so
Yeah, so I think that's might be about where we finish it for tonight. So a big thank you to Linley for sharing your wealth of information with us, and a big thank you to Jaden Walsh, who has also provided so many of the images tonight.
thanks, Lee.
We've been so blessed to have both of you contribute to this talk. We really appreciate it. And of course, thank you to everyone who attended the webinar. Hopefully I'll see you at one of our future biodiversity webinars. And if you do have any further questions for me, or you want to get a copy of the slides or the recording, at the bottom of your registration email, there's a contact host button. And so if you press that, it'll send me a message and I can then get back to you. Otherwise, you can feel free to contact the council customer service phone number or email address, and you can ask your questions there and you can ask them to direct you to the biodiversity team. So yeah, thank you so much, everyone.
No worries. Well, hopefully you guys are less nervous about them and more interested in having them as little backyard visitors after today. Snakes are
Hopefully.
brilliant.
They are.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you for listening to the long waffle.
Thank you
Bye.
so
Thanks,
much.
Zoe. Thanks, Christy.
Thank you, everyone.